Welcome back to Chess Dog. I'm John Montgomery, and today we're continuing our look at the white side of the King's Indian defense, the open King's Indian, a simple plan that white can use to really destroy the black position. You'll see the position in front of you. This is the bone structure of the open King's Indian defense, and this happens after black plays e5 and captures on d4. And the simple plan we're continuing to look at is the advance of the f-pawn. F4, F5. It's a very simple plan. It is really the main plan for white in this position, and it is really hard to defend against. In our game today, it's between Malakhov and Jobava. This was around the time they were both 2,700 rated players, very strong players, showing us clearly how white can dominate in this structure. Here's the beginning of the game. Malakhov has the white pieces, Jobava has the black. We begin with our King's Indian moves. He uses an English move order, but it transposes into the King's Indian defense. d6, d4, the main starting position of the King's Indian defense. And Malakhov plays bishop to d3. This is a little unorthodox. It's seen from time to time. I know Yasser Seirawan plays it quite a bit. I've even seen it named after him. And it's a very positional line. The idea behind it is to make it harder for black to follow the normal attacking pattern black has of e5 and f5 and so forth. So it can be a little annoying for the King's Indian player to face this line. Castles, knight ge2. He wants to overprotect d4 but not let black pin the knight if it will go to f3. a6, castle c6. He wants to play on the queen side with b5. a4, stopping the b5 expansion. Black plays a5. He's moved the pawn twice, but he's locked in that b4 square for his pieces. h3. White wants to play the bishop to e3, but doesn't want a knight to jump to g4 to annoy it. So he controls that square first. Knight a6, aiming for that new b4 square he's carved out for himself. Bishop e3. Continuing to protect d4. Knight to d7. Now we see black's plan. He's uncovered the bishop at g7. He wants to play e5. And then when white does something with that d4 pawn, either taking on e5 or advancing to d5 himself, he gets those two squares, the b4 and the c5 squares, for his knights. He wants to control those dark squares on the queen side. He'll play the queen to b6, queen to b4, and attack those a4 and c4 pawns. That's his goal. The problem is that even if he gets what he wants, it's not as effective as white's plan of simply marching that f-pawn up the board and attacking the king. Queen d2, e5, rook a to d1. White says, I'm not going to give you that c5 square. If you want it, you're going to have to take on d4, which he does, and now we have our standard open King's Indian defense structure, where white has a very simple plan, f4, f5. It's as simple as that. Black plays knight d to c5. He could play knight to e5, then the bishop goes to e2, the other knight goes to c5, but then white can play f4 with tempo, and after bishop f3, white has a good position. So black plays the knight to c5. The bishop goes back to b1. Black would like to take that bishop. I know it's a bad bishop. It's blocked in by c4 and e4, but white has more space, so black would love to trade off a piece. Also, it would give black the advantage of the two bishops. So white protects that bishop, moves it away. Queen to b6. The queen is good on that square. It has some pressure on d4, b2. It's threatening to go to b4 and attack those a4 and c4 pawns. The real problem is that black has essentially gotten everything that he wants, and it simply isn't enough. White can follow a simple textbook plan of advancing the f-pawn, and black's queenside counterplay isn't going to be enough. He begins f4 already. Queen to b4. The queen is aggressively posted, but she lacks maneuvering room. And in this kind of position, black has to be very careful not to get his queen trapped. And in this game, that becomes a big problem for him. You know, that queen doesn't have a lot of room to move. So can white checkmate the queen? Let's see. f5. White hasn't done anything special at all. I mean, you don't have to be a grandmaster to play these moves. f4, f5, just continuing. Now in this position, white takes on a4. That's a mistake, but there aren't a lot of good options. If he takes on c4 with the queen, then bishop a2, queen to b4, queen to f2, and now white's lining up his attack on the king's side. If black plays king to h8, then simply f6. The bishop is trapped. If he plays bishop to d7, then fg6. He has to retake with the h-pawn because that f7 pawn is pinned by that bishop at a2. Bishop f7 check, and if king h7, queen to h4 check, and after bishop h6, it's queen takes h6 mate. So after queen f2, he'd really have to take this pawn, but this is awful. He takes with the knight, bishop takes, pawn takes. He's threatening f6, followed by a check on g3, which would devastate. So black blocks it with the bishop, but then after rook to d6, attacking, getting the pawn, and also attacking the bishop on f6, it's over. So taking on c4 doesn't work. He could play knight to d7 to bring the knight back to defend the king, probably the best option. But then bishop h6, knight f6, bishop g7, king g7, and he's gotten rid of that powerful dark squared bishop, and those heavy pieces are once again aligned on that f-file. So white's in good shape here. Black takes the a-pawn with the knight. White plays f6. The bishop has to go to h8. So now that bishop has lost all of the mobility that it used to have. And now white starts to put pressure on that queen that has very limited squares. Knight c2. If the queen takes on c4 here, bishop a2. And the queen is completely trapped. You can look yourself. There's no square that queen can go to. The queen is completely trapped. So he moves to b3, bishop to a2, queen to b2, knight takes a4, the queen takes the bishop. The knight goes to b6, a really powerful move. Look at those four squares. Hits the rook at a8, the bishop at c8, and controls the a4 square and the c4 square, and that makes it very hard for the queen to escape. If black just tries to save the rook by playing rook to b8, then white plays rook to a1, queen to b3, rook to a3, queen to b2, all forced, bishop d4. And once again, the queen is trapped. If black plays queen to b2, then white could just take the rook and be in very good shape. But an even better option is bishop to d4, queen to b3, rook f3, queen e2, rook a1, and guess what? You're one step ahead of me. The queen is trapped. So black says, okay, I'll let you take the rook. I'll play bishop to e6 and hope that my queen can be saved. Rook a1, queen to b3, rook a3, queen b2, bishop d4, and black actually resigned in this position before white made his move. Rook a3, queen b2, bishop to d4. If you feel like you've gotten value from this video, be sure to like and subscribe. Click the bell notification for future videos, and comment down below, would you rather have white or black in the open King's Indian defense? We are going to cover some games where black does well. I promise you. Stay tuned. Thanks for joining us at Chess Dog.